Thank you, member. Recognizing Peace River South.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I want to start off by a big shout out to our farmers and our ranchers in the province of British Columbia, because I'm sure everybody else in this house like me, I enjoy eating. I enjoy food. But that's not going to happen if we don't continue to support our agricultural sector, and that's if we want to eat local food that's produced here. You know, there's nobody in this house that probably knows agriculture better than the member sitting next to me from Delta South, but I'm going to do my part to try to bring attention to an important issue here in the province of British Columbia, and that's really around our forage production insurance. Our production insurance, I think when I hear from a lot of the people who work in our agricultural sector, our farmers and our ranchers, you know, this year was probably one of the worst years that many of them have told me that they have faced because of the fires, the drought, floods, the impact that that's had on the landscape, and disease, frost. I mean, you could name so many different pressures that our agriculture sector has been under this year. But one of the challenges is when you have forage production insurance that comes in under Western Canadian farmers, the support that they're supposed to have. One of the things I'm hearing is the inconsistency or the lack of support within that insurance for flexibility because of what's happening on the landscape. Case in point is perfectly addressed when we look at what's happened this year up in the Peace region, for instance, where production insurance payout for many farmers, if they bought insurance for their crop, especially when it comes to the hay crops, was around $90 per ton. Here's the challenge, though. The insurance might sound really great at $90 per ton, but it wasn't flexible to the supply and demand issues that we faced this year because of the drought situation. That drought put so much pressure on the production this year. So, for instance, I looked at a lot of farmers in my region who, might be looking at 3, 4, 5 bales per acre that they would get for hay to be able to sustain them throughout the winter. But because of the drought year that we had, they were only getting 1 bale per acre. I looked across, and a member from Delta South thankfully came up and actually came into my riding and looked at some of the impacts. So you can imagine when you're trying to sustain, if you're using that to feed your cattle through the winter, how on the ground not getting enough bales. So even if you had insurance at $90 per ton, because of supply and demand, we were seeing costs of like $300, $320 per ton starting to happen in the region because of the supply and demand. Insurance wasn't covering it. And so many of the ranchers in our region had to make the tough decision of will they even keep their cattle throughout the winter. We were starting to see many operations, especially our smaller mom and pop farming operations, who are the lifeblood really of agriculture in British Columbia that we should be supporting, were having to come into my office and tell me that insurance wasn't covering it. And unfortunately, they were put in a situation that they now had to look at selling off some, in some cases, all of their cattle because they knew they didn't have the funds. They knew that they would basically be in a situation where their cattle would starve through the winter because even with the small payouts that insurance was promising, the supply wasn't there anyway. So those larger operations that were willing to spend the hundreds and hundreds of dollars were able to scoop up what they could for feed. And so for those that were growing hay, if it wasn't for their own operations, they maybe did okay because for the limited crop they had, they were able to recoup some of their costs because of the higher rates that they were able to charge. But at the end of the day, that did nothing on the ground for local small producers that were just looking for that hay to be able to produce, to keep their cattle throughout the winter. And again, I've heard so many sad stories. So we need to look at the forage production insurance and make sure that we have some flexibility built into it. But here's another issue that I actually didn't know about until many people brought this to my attention, was that the insurance doesn't cover your bales if they've already been combined and they're in storage. The insurance only covers it while it's on the land. So while it could be, as we know in Delta South, with a lot of the birds, the fowl that we have down there that are really devastating a lot of the crops that are in there, what's happening in the Peace region is people might be lucky enough to get some bales off, and then they put them in storage to feed their cattle throughout the year and throughout the winter months, and then they get devastated by wildlife. The amount of elk, because we need to do a better job managing our wildlife, for one, but up in my region, when I see herds of 100, 125, 150 elk going across a field, devastating all of the round bales that have been, luckily, where they were able to get a small amount off, they're in storage, and how horrible is it to find out that they've lost their entire production of hay, and to find out afterwards that it's not even covered in most situations by the production insurance. So here's another perfect example of where we need to, in Western Canada, be more flexible with this insurance. And in the get-go, we should be doing more to promote our agricultural sector to begin with. Now, this year was a devastating year, as I said, because of Mother Nature. An insult to injury was to hear that insurance didn't cover a lot of the impacts that our agricultural sector faced because of that. So, Honourable Speaker, I have a few more points that I'd love to make after a member opposite talks about this, but really it's important at the end. I'm hearing that, yes, we need to be looking at some flexibility around our insurance, more importantly, looking for ways to promote and support our agricultural sector in the province of British Columbia. Thank you.